Welcome to episode 5 from the series Master the Beat from Basic EKG to Life-Saving ACLS. In today's episode 5, we're diving into the foundations of all cardiac rhythms, normal sinus rhythm, the OG of the heart rhythms. Why is it called the OG? Well, normal sinus rhythm is the standard by which all other rhythms are measured. It's the baseline, the starting point, the rhythm that tells us that the heart is functioning normally. Let's dive into the OG of all rhythms, normal sinus rhythm. Here are the key features that define it. In normal sinus rhythm, the heart's electrical impulses originate from the SA node, which is known as the heart's natural pacemaker. Normal sinus rhythm will present with sinus P waves, which represent atrial depolarization, hence the atrial contraction. In normal sinus rhythm will always have one P wave that precedes each QRS. It's important you understand that the SA node is normal sinus rhythm's driver. It's the heart's natural pacemaker responsible for initiating each electrical impulse. The SA node generates impulses that travel through the atria, creating the P wave on the ECG and setting the stage for the synchronized atrial and ventricular contractions. Since the heart's electrical impulses originate from the SA node, if the heart doesn't match the characteristics of normal sinus rhythm, we know something abnormal is occurring. Let's break down those defining characteristics of normal sinus rhythm. Using the 6-step rhythm analysis method we learned in episode 4, we can define normal sinus rhythm characteristics. First, in step 1, we need to identify the rhythm, regularity. In normal sinus rhythm, the rhythm is regular, meaning the distance between each R wave on the ECG is consistent. Next is step 2, calculating the heart rate. For normal sinus rhythm, the heart rate ranges between 60 to 100 beats per minute in a resting adult. If it's slower than 60 beats per minute, it's bradycardia. If it's faster than 100 beats per minute, it's tachycardia. In step 3, we examine the P waves. In normal sinus rhythm, you'll see one P wave before each QRS complex. These P waves should be round, symmetrical, and upright in lead 2, indicating that the electrical signal is originating from the SA node. Step 4 is measuring the PR interval. The PR interval should measure between 0.12 to 0.20 seconds, indicating the normal time it takes for the electrical signal to travel from the atria to the ventricles. Any deviation from these ranges might suggest a conduction delay or block. In step 5, we analyze the QRS complex. Detailed in our previous episode, the QRS complex represents ventricular depolarization. In normal sinus rhythm, the QRS is narrow, lasting 0.10 seconds or less. Wider QRS may indicate issues like a bundle branch block or ventricular rhythms. Remember, the OG, normal sinus rhythm, has great clinical significance. Normal sinus rhythm isn't just important, it's the foundation for everything else in cardiac rhythm interpretation. Once you fully grasp what normal sinus rhythm looks like, identifying abnormalities becomes much easier. Unlock your full potential with Novamind LLC membership. As a member, you'll gain exclusive access to dozens of rhythm strip interpretations, including normal sinus rhythm and many other key arrhythmias. Let's do a sample strip to visually interpret normal sinus rhythm characteristics on an ECG strip. As we begin our ECG analysis, the first step is determining whether the rhythm is regular or irregular. So how do we determine if the rhythm is regular or irregular? The key here is the R to R interval, which is the time between two consecutive R waves, the sharp upward deflections representing ventricular depolarization. In normal sinus rhythm, the R to R interval should remain consistent throughout the strip. You can check for regularity by measuring the distance between each R wave. One method is to take a piece of paper or calipers, mark the distance between two R waves, and then move it across the strip. If the R to R intervals stay the same across the entire strip, the rhythm is regular. However, slight variations of up to 1 to 2 small boxes are considered normal, especially with respiratory sinus arrhythmia. If the variation exceeds 2 small boxes, you can classify the rhythm as irregular. In this example on the screen, you'll notice that the R to R intervals are nearly identical. There are about 18 small boxes in between each R-to-R interval, confirming a regular rhythm, which is consistent with normal sinus rhythm. Remember, the R-to-R interval is represented by the white lines I've placed on top of the R waves to help you visually understand the R-to-R interval I am measuring in this example. Step 2 involves estimating the heart rate. But before we can do that, it's important to confirm that the strip we're analyzing covers 6 seconds. On standard ECG paper, time is marked using small and large boxes. To verify that the strip is 6 seconds, we can either count 30 large boxes, since each large box represents 0.20 seconds, or look for 2 sets of 3-second hash marks at the top or bottom of the strip. In our example on the screen, I've highlighted the hash marks at the top of the strip with arrows and labeled them for clarity. Each pair of hash marks represents 3 seconds, so by identifying 2 sets or 3 consecutive hash marks, we can easily determine that this strip provides us with a 6-second window, which is essential for accurately estimating the heart rate. Once you've identified a 6-second strip, you can use it to estimate the heart rate by counting the number of R waves, the peaks of the QRS complexes. Multiply this number by 10 to estimate the heart rate in beats per minute. In the example on the screen, how many R's do you count in the 6-second window of our practice strip? If you said 8, you are correct. The heart rate is 8 times 10, which is 80. If you said 9, you were almost there. But see how the last R wave is after the third hashtag, making it fall outside of our 6-second window. Before moving on to the next step where we need to examine and compare all P waves in the rhythm strip, let's quickly review what the term sinus P wave refers to. P waves that originate from the sinoatrial node are referred to as sinus P waves. What makes a sinus P wave? Well, sinus P waves have specific identifiable characteristics on an ECG. First, they are upright and positive in key lead. In lead 2, P waves are upright and positive, which reflect the normal conduction of the electrical impulses starting in the SA node and moving toward the ventricles. This upright appearance is also seen in leads 1, AVF, V4 to V6. In a 12 lead, AVR, sinus P waves are typically negative, and in lead V1, it may appear biphasic. Another identifiable characteristic that P waves originating from the SA node or sinus P waves are that they are smooth and rounded with a uniform shape throughout the ECG strip. This uniformity indicates that the electrical signal is being generated and propagated consistently from the SA node. Now that we've defined what sinus P waves are, let's get back to normal sinus rhythm analysis. We are on step number 3, where we examine and compare all the P waves. In the example rhythm strip, we see all P waves are sinus P waves because they are all upright in lead 2. They are all smooth, round, and uniform across the rhythm strip. In normal sinus rhythm, there will be a consistent appearance of the P waves across all beats. In this example practice strip, we see a consistent pattern where there is one P wave for each QRS. In normal sinus rhythm, one P wave always precedes a QRS complex, which confirms that the atrial depolarization is followed by normal ventricular depolarization. Now let's move on to step 4, assessing the PR interval. On the screen is an enlarged view of our practice rhythm strip we have begun analyzing. For step number 4, in the rhythm analysis, we'll begin by carefully measuring the PR interval from the start of the P wave to the start of the QRS complex. Once we've measured the PR interval, we will compare each PR interval across the strip to check for consistency. This helps us determine whether there are any conduction delays or abnormalities. To measure the PR interval, start at the beginning of the P wave where it leaves the baseline and measure to the start of the QRS complex. In this specific example, I've marked the start of the PR interval with a white vertical line at the beginning of the P wave and another white line at the end of the PR interval just before the QRS complex begins. The line connecting them represents the entire PR interval, allowing us to clearly visualize this measurement. For even better clarity, I've placed one small dot in each small box that is in the PR interval. How many small squares do you count in between these 2 points? If you counted 4, you are correct. If you multiply these 4 small squares by 0.04 seconds, then the PR interval for this practice strip equals 0.16 seconds. Do you remember if this is normal? For normal sinus rhythm, a normal PR interval should measure between 0.12 to 0.20 seconds. That is 3 to 5 small squares. So yes, our PR interval of 0.16 seconds is within normal limits for normal sinus rhythm. But we're not done with step 4 yet. Next, we need to assess the consistency of the PR intervals across the entire strip. This means comparing each PR interval to ensure that they remain consistent throughout the rhythm strip. This is a crucial step that, in my experience, many professionals tend to skip, leading to confusion. Ensuring consistency in the PR interval is key for accurate rhythm analysis and detecting any conduction abnormalities. In our example, we have a consistent PR interval, which measures 0.16 seconds across the strip. This falls within the normal range of 0.12 to 0.20 seconds in normal sinus rhythm and indicates proper conduction from the atria to the ventricles. Next, on to step number 5, where we measure the QRS complex. In the example on the screen, I've followed the same process as I did for the PR interval by enlarging the strip to enhance the view for easier measuring. I've marked the beginning of the QRS complex with a white line and the end of a QRS complex with another white line. The line connecting these 2 points represents the QRS duration, allowing us to measure how long ventricular depolarization takes. Note there is also a small dot in each small box that measures the QRS duration. What do you calculate the QRS duration in this example to be? In the marked QRS duration, there are 2 small squares. We take those 2 small squares and multiply it by 0.04 seconds, which gives us a QRS interval of 0.10 seconds, which is normal for normal sinus rhythm. Step 6 in the EKG rhythm analysis is to evaluate the ST segment and T wave. In the example on the screen, I've clearly marked the J point, which is where the QRS complex ends and the ST segment begins. I've also added the red dotted line to indicate the isoelectric line, which serves as the baseline for comparison. In our example, the ST segment returns to the baseline as it should in a normal sinus rhythm, indicating no significant elevation or depression. When further evaluating the T wave, it is normal in shape and size. It is upright in lead 2, making this example show us a normal ST segment and T wave in normal sinus rhythm. In summary, this rhythm strip shows a regular rhythm with an estimated heart rate of around 80 beats per minute. We observe sinus P waves with one P wave preceding each QRS complex. The J point returns to the isoelectric line, and the strip concludes with a normal T wave. These findings confirm that the rhythm is normal sinus rhythm. And remember, for more practice and to truly master the rhythm strip analysis, don't forget to become a member at www.novamindllc.com or through our YouTube channel. As a member, you'll gain access to dozens of practice strips to ensure you're ready for any rhythm interpretation needed for your patients. It's important to highlight a few of the most common misconceptions rooted in racial essentialism within cardiovascular medicine. It's been long assumed that African Americans are biologically more prone to hypertension and heart failure. However, recent research emphasizes that environmental, social, and economic factors, rather than race, is the focus when analyzing these health disparities. Another significant issue is the use of race in cardiovascular disease risk prediction models. As Warwick et al. Discuss, including race in these algorithms perpetuates the flawed belief that race is a biological determinant. This practice also leads to biased clinical decisions. Finally, socioeconomic status is is a major determinant of cardiovascular outcomes, always more significant than race itself, research shows that differences in heart disease between Black and white patients are largely attributed to socioeconomic status rather than racial differences. For example, studies found that in low socioeconomic status areas, life expectancy differences between Black and white patients with acute myocardial infarction were minimal, underscoring the importance of socioeconomic factors. These insights remind us that addressing health disparities requires moving beyond racial essentialism and focusing on real determinants of health such as socioeconomic conditions and access to healthcare. At Novamind LLC, our core values are firmly aligned with the American Medical Association's policies, which assert that there is no biological evidence of race and it is a social construct. We adhere to the AMA policies that advocate for the elimination of race as a proxy for ancestry, genetics, and biology in medical education, research, and clinical practice. This is why Novamind sets itself apart as the pioneer in health equity education and professional development through our unwavering commitment to these principles. Every course we create is designed to identify and challenge the ingrained biases that have historically influenced and continue to affect healthcare today. Our approach is not just about delivering content, it's about transforming, understanding, and establishing new guidelines for educating healthcare professionals. We've reached the end of episode 5. Thank you so much for joining me. Don't miss our next episode, The Sinus Node Blues, where we go on into in-depth understanding of arrhythmias. So I hope to see you in episode 6. Don't miss out. Follow us, subscribe, like, and share. Pause to read references.